Kudou here with a special fan requested video today. My first fan request ever, so thank you very much. If you read the title, you probably also realize that this is a Madoka Magica trial deck review. Or I guess here on YouTube we call them deck profiles. So what I'll do here is I'll go over each level individually, then I'll go over events, then climaxes, and then talk about how the deck works as a whole. This deck's got a pretty decent level 0, I mean it's nothing super fantastic, but it's definitely no pushover. This deck's running 8 vanillas, 4 blue and 4 green. Vanilla 0 3000 aren't actually that bad. They step over a lot of other cards that have effects that don't get into the super high 3500 or 4000 range. And the fact that you get both colors gives your deck some color coordination. See, right now you can use them as turn 0 3000s that just step over things, but later in the game, that means you've got 4 throwaway greens and 4 throwaway blues, depending on what you need at the time. Infirmary Officer Madoka is the only climax combo in the deck. When she attacks, if you have the girl from the dream in your climax area, then you can pay 1, clock the top card of your deck, and put 1 character from your clock into your hand. People underestimate the power of this card. It pretty much lets you pay 1 stock, you get 1 more hand advantage, and nothing really changes with your clock. Kyosuke is something of a boss. Pretty much what you can do with him is, when he attacks, you look at the top card of your deck, and it can go on top or bottom. One of the main uses to this card is if the top card of your deck is a climax card, you can put it on the bottom so you don't accidentally stock it. This also means that when you hit the bottom of your deck, you have at least 1 guaranteed climax cancel. Normal Girl Madoka is a pretty basic plus 500 power to the characters in front of her card. Early game assists do win games, I have seen it happen. Madoka brought a pretty interesting new mechanic called Shift with it. Basically, if the character is in your clock during or above its shift level, at the end of your clock phase you can clock a card from your hand that is the same color as the shift card and put that character back into your hands. This really isn't the greatest shift card ever. You will probably never get its effect off because this deck is all about having really good field advantage. But if you don't have a full front row and it's still level 0, then at the end of your clock phase you can put a higher level card that you're not going to use into the clock and get this back and have a full field. That's pretty good, I guess. It just seems so counterproductive considering how useful its effect would be if this wasn't this kind of deck. The girls really start shining on level 1. You've got really good beat sticks, and this is also when you get your best assist and a really good counter. Just like at level 0, we get ourselves 2 vanillas. Level 1 5500s that don't cost anything aren't that bad either. One unique thing that might stand out for you is the fact that you actually get 4 Sayakas and only 2 Madokas. This is because your backup tech and your assist tech both require you to have blue in your clock or your level. That means if you level up using a blue card, you have access to all 4 of your Sayakas and your really good backup and assist tech. The deck is essentially teaching you about leveling up effectively and keeping your levels really balanced. On level 1, all of your really good cards revolve around blue, so it's more effective to level up with a blue card during your first level. This creates a consistency with your games, because if you know that all of your really good cards during level 1 are going to be blue, you know that you're looking to level up using a blue card during your first level up. This is pretty advanced stuff, and I actually applaud this deck for teaching. Magical Girl of the Sword Sayaka acts as this deck's backup card. It's decent, it's blue, so it keeps with the consistency. It gives 2000, which is actually pretty powerful on level 1. It does cost stock to play, which is normally a turn-off for backup cards, but at the same time, this deck doesn't use stock for very much else, so it's not that big of a deal if you have to pay 1 stock to get a plus 2000 boost. Smiling Sayaka is pretty much the best assist you're going to get in the starter deck. She gives plus 500 for every assist character you have on the field, and a lot of people look at that as, oh wow, if I have a lot of assists in the front row as well as the back row, then she gives plus 2000. If I have 2 of them, that's a plus 4000 boost to the one in the middle. That is a good idea in theory, but at the same time, that's not really what you want to aim for because having assists in the front row will only be good one time, for one turn, for one character. I look at her more as she gives 1000 of the characters in front of her with the downside that if you don't have 2 assists in play, she doesn't give the full 1000. Another little interesting side note is she has Super Encore. That means that if you don't have a full field, you can put her in the front row, side attack with her for the stock, and then when your opponent attacks and destroys her on the next turn, you can just super encore back into play and your assist is fine. You can just move her back to the back row. Just an interesting little note to keep in the back of your mind if you do happen to play her and you're playing this deck. Battle of Walpurgis Nacht Homera is an interesting card. Her effect is, when you attack, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you choose one to put in the discard pile and one to put back on top, which is obviously going to be the card you trigger because this is before you actually trigger a card from the attack. This is great for 2 reasons. The first is, if you look at the top 2 cards of your deck and one of them is a climax, you can put the climax directly into your discard pile. That means that it won't go to your stock, and it's guaranteed that it's in your discard pile for when you refresh. The second is, if you're going for a lot of soul damage, then you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and if one of them has a soul trigger and the other one doesn't, you can make sure that the one with a soul trigger is going to be the card on top of your deck. The Madoka trial deck has a lot weaker level 2 game than a lot of other trial decks. You're pretty much just going to rely on one single solitary good beat stick to finish the game off for you. If you're playing the Madoka trial deck, you will learn to love this card. Ally of Justice Sayaka is pretty much going to be your main beat stick. She's a turn 2 that only costs 1, and if you have 3 or more other magical girls in play, then she's a 9,000. Well, if you've been playing your assists correctly, you should have 2 assist magical girls in the back, and hopefully 1 other character in the front row. Honestly, there should never be a time where this card is not a 9,000, so you can pretty much rely on it being a 9,000, with the downside of, if your hand sucks, she's only an 8,000. One of the things that makes this card such a big deal is normally in order to get a 9,000 on the field, you have to pay 2 stock, whereas with this one you only have to pay 1 with that minor downside. One thing, though, that really kind of sucks about this card, and I really wish they would have changed, is she's only got 1 soul level. I guess it's because she only costs 1 stock, they had to make her a little weaker, but not having that 2 soul level to fall back on is kinda lame. It's a minor nitpick, this is still a really good card. Your other level 2 is Same Wish, Sayaka, and Kyoko. This card is really fascinatingly good. It's an 8500 level 2 that attacks for 2 soul damage. Its effect is it gets plus 500 power during your opponent's turn for every other magic character you have, which means it's probably going to be getting plus 2000 because you're probably always going to have a full field. That makes it a 10,500, and that's even before you consider any assists you have in the back row. You would actually be really surprised how many cards that this card walls against. Let's say for a second you have 1 of each assist. You have a normal girl Madoka, which gives 500, and a smiling Sayaka, which gives 1000 because you have the Madoka. That means if this card is in the middle, during your opponent's turn, it's a natural 10,500 plus 1,500 more, which makes it a 12,000. This will stop 90% of all level 2s, and even a lot of level 3s. It's just ridiculous. This trial deck's got 2 different level 3s. 2 very, very beefy, good level 3s. I'm serious. The level 3 in this deck is actually a lot more powerful than a lot of other decks' level 3 plays. Madoka Kaname is ridiculously good. Just like with Ally of Justice Sayaka, she gets plus 1000 if you have at least 3 other magical girls on the field. I'm telling you right now, if it's this late into the game and you cannot get 2 other magical girls in the back row and 1 magical girl in the front row, then I don't know what you did wrong. What I'm trying to say is you can pretty much always count on this being an 11,000 unless something really crappy happened to your hand. When she's played, she gives all of your other characters another plus 2,000. Super good. Although, as a side note, this only works for the characters currently in play, so make sure she's the last character you play for the turn. And on top of all of that, both of those super amazing abilities, you can also pay 1 stock to give her a plus 2,000. With how cheap everything in this deck is, you're gonna have plenty of stock. You can make her as powerful as you want, and you can step over any deck that snowballs a really powerful character. These abilities come at the cost of not having normal level 3 abilities, like you don't heal once on the clock, and you don't give the character opposing her -1 soul. But she's so powerful in so many other ways, that's not a disadvantage at all. She finishes games. That's what you're trying to do, is at level 3, you need to finish the game as quickly as possible, and she gives you all of the tools you need to do that. Homer is not quite as game-changing as Madoka is, but believe me, okay, give her a chance, cause she's pretty good too. If you happen to roll low on stock, then she gets Super Encore and a 500 boost. The 500 boost isn't going to matter too much this late in the game, but the Super Encore is super helpful, because if you've got 4 or less stock, then you don't have enough stock to keep encoring your characters back. So you can pretty much just attack, Super Encore, and then when they attack you back, Super Encore. So she has the super powerful abilities when she needs them. She also gives the character facing her -1 soul, which is a pretty normal level 3 ability. It's good that this deck has it. One great piece of tech is this. Let's say you've only got 5 stock, and your opponent attacks her and, let's say, Madoka. You can pay the 3 to bring Madoka back, and because now you meet all of the requirements for her first ability, she can now Super Encore herself, because she meets the requirement you have 4 or less cards in your stock. Just keep that little nugget in the back of your mind. If you're going to be playing this deck and you're going to be playing this card, then you need to remember that her effect happens during the Encore phase, and you can still pay cards from your stock during the Encore phase to save other characters, and then her effect triggers as soon as you hit 4 or less cards in your stock. Just a good thing to remember. This deck runs one event called Law of Cycles. It lets you pay 1 and you get a magic character from your deck and put it in your hand. So the effect pretty much just reads like this. I recommend holding on to this card until you need an ally of Justice Sayaka or you hit level 3 and need one of your level 3s. As far as climaxes go, you get 3 of the Girl from the Dream. It's 1 stock and all your characters deal 1 more damage. That's good, and it's also part of the climax combo. You get 2 Miracles and Magic Exist, and obviously I love +2 souls. They can be really dangerous if used wrong, but they can really flip games around if used correctly. And lastly, no longer relying on others. I want to talk a little bit about this card because I think these climaxes are really good and really underrated. It's only a 1000 power 1 soul, which is pretty common, but it's also got the gold bar trigger, and the gold bar trigger is super powerful. See, when you trigger a gold bar, you put that climax in your hand and stock the top card of your deck. Since you don't know what you're stocking, you might want to get rid of it pretty quickly because you don't know if you're stocking another climax card, but it's a climax that can never hit your stock. That is amazing. Not only that, but you don't have to spend any cards from your hand to do it, so you get a +1 in your hand, and that climax can't hit the stock. A booyah. Overall, I think the Madoka Trial deck is a really, really good deck. I don't think it's as user-friendly or as newbie-friendly as a lot of other starter decks that I've seen. I still think that the Sword Art Online has the best trial deck to get into the game with. But if you can learn how to use the advantage of the extra stock that you're going to get playing this deck to your advantage, then it's a super powerful deck. One thing I think is really cool about this deck that a lot of other trial decks don't do is because your tech is just so ridiculously cheap, then you can attack with characters and not be afraid to encore them. You can encore your more powerful characters without having to worry about getting rid of your stock, because you don't really use your stock for anything else anyway. So yeah, that's my biggest tip if you're going to play this deck. Learn what your characters do, learn how to keep a full field, and don't be afraid to encore if you need to. I think that's it for today, Weiss fans. Don't forget to subscribe if you liked this, it really helps me out. And if you have anything that you would like me to do a video on, just leave it in the comments below. I don't mind taking requests. This was a fan request. I could go a bit deeper into the Madoka tech, or I could talk a little bit more about the Madoka booster cards. I'll do whatever you want me to. Just let me know what you want. I'm out for now. Catch you later, YouTube.